south of Joliet. It's going to be heading towards, you see Green Garden there. Again, a little bit closer, and I'll stop the radar for you so you can see where we're looking at. Slight hook signature here. Typically, we look for that where the rotation is starting to draw in some of the precipitation, and you're starting to see that. So where would the rotation be? It's going to be right at the end of this little appendage here, right where it says Simmerton. That's where we're looking at the possible rotation. Now, keep in mind, the radar itself is going to have a slight delay. All radars have that delay as the beam goes around and scans the entire environment. So if there is rotation, it may be a little farther east here, north and east, maybe a little bit closer to Wilton. Here is State Road, US 52. That's where we'll see the rotation begin to pass over. We do still have the tornado warning for radar indication, although in just a moment I'm going to step off just to make sure. There's an additional tornado warning that just popped up. I want to get you to that one. That one is actually in the city. This includes the city of Chicago. Let me back you up and let me get you close to that one. This one is going to include the loop. If I can get a camera, if I can get REM4 or MW3 looking right at the city. If we can get that camera up, I want to see if we can maybe get a better idea. Give me a location looking west. We're looking south from this. If you can give me another location looking west. If you're able to find one of those, bring me back to radar until you find the proper source here, because I want to make sure I update that information. This is going to be Cook County until 12:15 for the very minor rotation that I saw a little bit earlier, but I actually want to bring that back up because the rotation was pretty impressive at one point, and it had me a bit concerned, but it had weakened. So once I get the velocity on here, I'm going to take you in real close and show you exactly where that rotation is. It looks like it's actually moving right over the downtown area. Let me see if I can back out and get the tornado warning information, see if this was indicated by radar or if this was indicated by an actual spotter. The one for Cook County is going to be in place until 12:15. And that is going to be radar indicated, and this one is going to be right over, or at least it was when it was issued, it was right over East Garfield Park, West Town. This is moving north and east. There's a good bit of wind signature right about there. Let me get in a little closer so you can see that. We'll get in right over the city, because they're moving pretty quick. There's two things I'm watching here. One is what's right over maybe the North Loop, and there's the new scan that puts it really maybe right over, I'd say, maybe Lakeview. It's hard to tell. The rotation is pretty broad at this point. We're looking at these greens and these reds really close together. This is a little bit of clutter here. I'm not actually looking at that. What I'm looking at is this area of red, which is away, this area of green, which is toward, and that implies a little bit of location. That's what I'm seeing here, but there was an additional area farther back to the west that I was looking at. We have another west-looking view. Okay, perfect. Starting to see those dark skies, and I know we can't pan, tilt, zoom this, but I just want to see the rotation that I'm seeing here is not what I'm looking at there. I am actually going to move this down the line and see if I can look at possible rotation a little farther out. And the reason why is I'm seeing a couple of areas here that were showing up in the scans that had me a bit concerned about possible rotation. There was an additional little area here, maybe right near Cicero, that had me a bit concerned. If we have the Hancock camera that looks west from here, I'd love to see that. I know you're on, I think that's REM 7 that we're watching. But if we're able to look almost due west, I know we're looking a little bit south and west. There's a little bit of minor rotation here west of Cicero. In fact, I'll get in closer so you can see the areas that I'm talking about. But there's also a good bit of, that's a great shot that I'm looking at there. And I'm just trying to get an idea of it. What I'm looking at is a lot of the rain with this as well. I'm going to put the radar back on, so a lot of this may be shielded by some rain. Good bit of rain now approaching the city, and that is probably where we are seeing some minor rotation. So I think it's less likely that it's the area that I was concerned about a little bit earlier, and potentially a little bit more likely that it's this area back to the west. I think we're going to see, and let me stop the radar, and thank you for pulling me back to full because I wanted to really dive in close here. A lot of heavy rain. This is going to be rain wrapped. You may not even see a funnel with this if it does touch the ground. The whole thunderstorm is rotating, but it's rotating only It's not as strong a signature perhaps as what we saw last Sunday, and that's a bit of good news, but it is still a signature that has me a bit concerned. It's really hard to determine exactly where the rotation is with this, but you would look at maybe areas, again, kind of in that Cicero area. It is really hard to get a good bead with this radar signature of what we're looking at. Also, there's much stronger winds out ahead of this, and there may be a couple of areas of circulation in here. One that is now exiting over the lake. You probably just had some pretty strong winds come through the north side of the city. There's a great shot from Grant Park looking north at some of the stronger, the darker clouds farther maybe over the north side of the city. That's what I'm looking at here. In fact, I'll leave that picture up if you could. And again, I don't know who's up there. I think it's Drake, but Drake, if you could just leave that up for me. This is exactly what I'm looking at. I'm looking north into this heavy rain. This kind of bright pink blob that we're looking at here is the heavy rain. There was some minor rotation within that, but we're also looking from the loop to the north, and we're looking straight into that. Still haven't seen if we have any damage reports. I'm actually going to pop up and see if I can see any. If I'm able to pull it up here, I will. Otherwise, I'll just have to pop off camera real quick to check my computer. I just want to see if any storm reports have come in within the last maybe 15 minutes or so of any damage. I have not seen that. Typically, it is a little bit delayed when we have a storm like this. So far, nothing in the area that was warned. I'm going to drop out here in just a moment after I put the radar back on so you can see what's happening. Just to show you really intense rain. Some winds embedded within that as well, but not the strong winds that I saw that were moving off the lake shore. Just going to take a look at a couple of things. Also have the marine warning that's going to be in place for any boaters that are out on the lake today. That is going to be a concern as well, but not our biggest concern. This was on the northwest side of the city where the rotation started to pick up. It's now moving toward the lake shore. So it was that immediate north side that we were looking at. Really not the strongest rotational signature I've seen, but here's a couple of things it does. It does tell me that a lot of the rotation embedded within this line is going to be quick to spin up and then quick to slow back down. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me pull what we call our velocity back up. We use this a lot Sunday night when we were looking at the tornado that was moving through Naperville and through Wood Ridge. What I look at here is really bright greens and really bright reds jammed right up next to each other in the right configuration. This red box that you see right here is the tornado warning, but the rotation, or at least the strongest rotation, has likely now exited. There's a little bit of minor rotation within that, and there may be some additional rotation that's starting to develop here. I know this is a different view from what you're used to looking at, but as a meteorologist, this is key for me to determine exactly where that rotation is. I think we're probably going to see this warning be allowed to expire or perhaps even canceled a little bit earlier, although they may leave it in place for some of these additional spin-ups. This is not the only tornado warning that we are watching at the moment. I have several tornado warnings that have been fired off because of these rotating thunderstorms. One is directly over the city. It includes the loop, and it includes the immediate north side. That immediate north side, I hear my tornado alert going off in the background. Let me see if I can just get you the newest information, unless they've either updated that or if we have an extension. We were also looking at the Will County as well as the Groundy and LaSalle County tornadoes, tornado warnings that are in place. The Will County until 12:15, the Groundy and LaSalle County until 12:30. These also are rotating thunderstorms, but they're slightly different from what we're seeing across the city. And because of that, the nature of them is just a little bit different. I'm just going to pop off camera real quick just to see if we have any. Getting a report of maybe some west of downtown, some phones that were going off because of the warning. We expect that. We know how things go when we have those emergency alerts. Most of you probably got an alert on your phone. You probably heard my phone going off in the background because of that tornado warning that came off. So now that I've got a quick little update here of what's happening, let me get back to the screen and talk about these three tornado warnings. One, directly over the city on the north side, but has likely exited. This one has likely exited the lake, although there's still a couple of areas we're watching. One, south of Joliet. This is moving northeast at about 35. And then two, where we actually saw the strongest rotation, is now approaching Grundy County. And what's going to happen is they're going to trim this tornado warning box back a little bit. You'll probably see that right with the noon, right as we strike noon here. So you're going to see this trimmed back just a little bit. It is certainly possible that we may see more of these warnings fire off. There's a pretty good line of storms that have some embedded wiggle to them. I mentioned that right before the Cook County tornado warning fired off. This isn't a straight line. There's a lot of little notches and ridges that are going on here. And that is what I'm going to be watching when it comes to our velocity, when it comes to watching the rotational signature that I look for. I look at these little undulations, and anytime I see that, it gets me a little bit concerned, because those can be rotations that are going to spin up very quickly, and then they may dissipate very quickly, which is a bit of good news, but it also makes it a little bit more difficult to track when you're looking at possible rotations. The earlier rotation that prompted this tornado warning for Chicago and the north side, all the way over to maybe some of the near west side, that has moved offshore. But notice there's a couple of little red and green spots here that I'm watching, and that is where we still could have a couple of minor spin-ups. I'm not as concerned right now about the city of Chicago as I was perhaps maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago, because the winds were pretty strong as they went through, say, Lakeview and then down to maybe River North, even including the Loop, although it appeared that most of the heaviest rain was maybe, you can see from Grant Park there, most of this is farther north of the Loop. We're not seeing the heaviest rain right over the Loop. We know it's a weekend. We know there's a lot of boats out on the lake. We know that people are trying to enjoy this, but we do expect some of these storms to contain some gusty winds. So even outside of the tornado warning, this is going to be something that we'll have to watch and keep our eye on. That's storm number 1. I want to take you down to storm number 2 that has been showing some rotation, and it prompted the tornado warning in Will County. So let me take you farther to the south. I'm actually going to kind of pop back out to our wide view to show you what I'm talking about. This is the storm that we'll keep our eye on, and this one will move into the southern and southwestern suburbs, likely within the next 15 minutes or so. And then the additional storm that's now moved into Grundy County. Very quickly, I just want to put up the warnings so that you can see the warnings. Probably going to see this one trimmed back just a little bit. They've actually dropped the Will County tornado warning. That rotation was already a little bit weak, but has weakened a good bit. I'll still take a look at that in just a moment. But it's this rotation into parts of Grundy County and also in parts of LaSalle County, that have bared watching. This one has been the strongest one that I've seen rotation-wise. The one over Cook County was not as impressive. I'm going to get back to that one in just a moment. Even the rotation here is certainly not what it was 45 minutes or so ago. It was quite a well-defined rotation. This is what I'm talking about when I look for what we call a couplet, rotational signature. Bright greens, these reddish colors. This is a little bit of what we think is a little bit of clutter here, a little bit of data that's not necessarily accurate. This is what I look for. As that rotation, you see it updates and moves a little northeast at about 35 miles per hour. This is just crossing into Grundy County. Still have the tornado warning out. That's the box that you see here. It's going to go just to the west of Dwight. Here's Interstate 55, and then continuing northeast, likely impacting many locations in the southern central part of Grundy County. Probably will not impact Morris, although you're going to see some heavy rain from this. Garfield, this is where we want you to really make sure you're seeking shelter at this point, because that rotation is moving a bit closer. Wider view, going back to the city, because many of you in Chicago are still concerned about the tornado warning. I am not as concerned about it, because I do see things beginning to ease up a little bit. The signature is not there like it was just a bit ago. If I put this into motion, you'll be able to see, hopefully, that there it is right there. In fact, watch this little bright green blob that just kind of moves across the screen. I'll step out of the way. It's going to move right over where it says Cicero. You're going to see that bright little green blob, and as it moves through, there it is. That was where the rotation was tight enough that we saw it move across the Ike, eventually across the Kennedy, just the rotation, nothing indicated, and then the north side, Lakeview area, and then has headed out of here. Gold Coast as well. We saw that from that live picture. Things are improving when it comes to rotation, but things are not necessarily improving when it comes to the extreme rainfall that's happening across much of the area. A couple of things I just want to warn you about as we go through the afternoon. This may just be the start of many more storms that we'll watch. I think we're going to have many of these tornado warnings go off throughout the afternoon and maybe even into the early evening. The strongest of the storms right now, unfortunately, are right over areas that had to deal with the tornado on Sunday. Heavy rain coming down for those locations that have a lot of tarps on their roof, have damage, are still trying to put things back together after the EF3 that went through less than a week ago, and now we have a line of stronger storms that will continue. Let me remove the banner just so you can see, in case you're in McHenry or Lake counties, you want to see the radar. I do want to update you on that. A couple of things I'm watching when I notice this. I do see some interest in this cell that's just to the west of O'Hare. I'm going to watch that one. I also see some interest in perhaps that Joliet cell to the east of Joliet. It may kind of wax and wane with the intensity a little bit. Boy, some extremely heavy rain coming down in those areas, Woodridge, Naperville, Downers Grove, Plainfield, where we had the issues with the tornado on Sunday. I hate to see that much rain coming down, but we knew flooding was going to be a concern from some of these. Let me go back to our warnings just to update that, because I want to make sure there's no new information that's come out. We've had 2 tornado warnings that we're keeping our eye on. One still for the city, although that one I'm surprised they have not canceled it a little bit earlier. I believe it goes until 12:15. Most of the couplet, the rotation with this, has passed into the lake, but still some heavy rain and some minor individual rotations back behind that may lead the National Weather Service to keep that in place. Farther south, the warning that was in place just to the south and east of Joliet, that's expired. We see no warning at the moment. We have an additional tornado warning that's now south of Morris, moving right through the southern part of Groundy County. That warning is going to be in place until 12:30. Again, I am not as concerned about the Chicago storm as I am about this storm, because the rotation with this one is much stronger. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to let folks know that are in the most danger, the most impact, know where they need to be seeking shelter. And right now it's southern and really southeastern parts of Groundy County, south of Morris. Cook County, it's going to expire at 12:15. I can't imagine they're going to allow it to go that long, but it is certainly possible because of some of that embedded rotation. I'm also going to take a look at a couple of other things here, and just bear with me. I'm tracking this along with you as things change. So when I look at areas maybe just near O'Hare where there's some gusty winds that are starting to pick up, these bright greens, I'm not seeing the bright greens with the bright reds that would imply rotation. And so there's no tornado warning out for this. There's not even a severe thunderstorm warning out from this. But there are going to be some gusty winds that'll pop through here. So we're looking at from O'Hare to the southwest. I hear my printer going off, so I just want to check and make sure that they've either canceled that warning or that there's not a new warning that's going off. Still have the tornado warning right now for Cook County. Still have the tornado warning for Groundy County. Nothing has changed here, but certainly starting to see the radar become a little bit more interesting. Let me go back to that O'Hare area, because that's where the winds were looking impressive. And there was one cell in here that I watched that looked like it was kind of sitting out on its own. And that's one of the things I look for when you look for intensity of these storms. When they're kind of out on their own, every now and then they have a better chance to rotate. They don't have the other storms around them interfering with that circulation pattern. So a couple here from O'Hare to Bloomingdale. This is not under a tornado warning. I just want you to see where you have some gusty winds moving by and areas of concern. Wooddale, Addison, where we were concerned about a tornado possibly touching down last Sunday. Farther south we go. I'm going to put the radar into motion. That bright area of green, notice how it's advancing to the east, and that's what we're seeing on that western camera that we saw earlier. And if they want to pop that up, they are, I'm happy to have that nice picture of the western part of the city, or even that Grant Park location. That was also a nice camera. These winds are going to eventually approach the city. Now, if we see those continue to increase, we may see a severe thunderstorm warning issued for a good portion of the city. Just means we're expecting some gusty winds. I'm not seeing a signature that strong from it, but it's certainly one of the things that I'm watching with the line of very heavy rain. And I'll go back to the regular radar so you can see what I'm looking at. It doesn't look like a lot on radar, but these are the areas that are out on their own that I was telling you about. The heaviest rain is now moving over Chicago. In fact, if we have that live picture of looking west, you may see this where, boy, it's going to be quite impressive. In fact, one of the things that concerns me now about this is that that storm is starting to exhibit a slightly different signature on radar. Let me show you what I mean here. What you're looking at is west from the city, from the loop, into the very heavy rain that's coming down. So you're essentially looking right into that brightest red, and I'll stop the radar so it won't be moving. You're looking right into that brightest red, and it's essentially going to move right over that camera. What is a little concerning about that is, if you have been watching for the last 10 or 15 minutes, I talked about these undulations and these kind of wiggles in the line, and that's what I'm seeing here. So what I don't want to see is some rotation spin back up in this area just over the west loop right now, essentially. And I am seeing some minor shift in the winds here, but not enough that has me concerned for possible pinpointing an exact rotation, because that's really not what I'm seeing at the moment. What I'm seeing is winds starting to pick up as the rain moves through. Still have the tornado warning in place, but the rotation that I was most concerned about has now passed far offshore. There was some minor rotation here, but what's interesting about that is it's actually what we call anticyclonic rotation, which we don't often see. But this is not where the heaviest of the rain is. So again, not as concerned here about the city of Chicago, but I know that's also where most of you are watching from. So I want to update you. Heaviest of the rain moving through, tornado warning still in place. Nothing other than a radar indication, at least that I've seen at this time. I'm going to move back to the warnings just to get the latest information on the screen for you, so I can just step off camera for a moment and check to see if any new information has come in as far as damage or any reports of anything that we've seen. The Red Cross is actually chiming in from their resource center at Jefferson Junior High. They've got an approximate population of 500 people from Woodridge. So they have some concerns there about the heavy rain that's going on, where the tornado hit just less than a week ago. We do still have they were keeping that Central Cook warning for the additional rotation back near Forest View. So this is exactly what I was thinking about when I was wondering why they were leaving that in place. It's because there were additional minor rotations. They're going to expire that or reassess the Cook County warning once that moves over the lake. I know that was a lot of information. Let me tell you what's happened. Here's the Cook County storm. I'm going to get back to this Grundy County, southern Grundy County storm in just a moment. But because most of you in Chicago are watching this and wondering what's going on, you've had your phones go off, I want to tell you what's happening. Things are improving in the city of Chicago. We do have heavy rain that's moving in. If you're standing in the loop, things are actually going to go downhill because the heavy rain is coming through. But as far as the tornadic threat, things are certainly improving. The radar itself is much more active than it was perhaps even just 20 or 30 minutes ago. And the reason why is the heaviest of the rain is moving through. When you look at a radar like this compared to a picture of what you're seeing here, they don't always kind of match up. In other words, what you're seeing on radar is extremely heavy rain, but that doesn't necessarily show you where we're seeing the strongest rotation. And I just paused a moment because you can see some of those low-hanging clouds from this image that are kind of sweeping on by across the city. Remember, we're looking at things moving from southwest to northeast at about 35 miles per hour. And I know some of those clouds are hanging down pretty low. You can see the rain shafts moving across the city. You're going to see more and more of the city skyline there obscured. You're even starting to see that from Grant Park. You're starting to see the wind pick up a little bit. Notice the raindrops in front of that camera that are drifting from left to right, the wind blowing rain, wind-driven rain. This is going to be the heaviest of the rain, but it's not where we have the concern for the rotation. What happened was this: when this storm was in the western part of the city, it had some minor rotation, just enough that the Weather Service said we're going to issue the tornado warning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back to what we use so often during Sunday's event and also the early part of this event. The western part of the city had a little bit of minor rotation, and when I put this into motion, you're going to see this bright little green spot that's going to exit now into the lake. It's actually sitting about here now, but you're going to see that bright spot move by. Here it is again, and it moves right on by. That was where the rotation picked up. It moved over the lake, but the Weather Service left this tornado warning because there are additional little blotches of rotation that have popped up. This is going to be a quick spin up, quick spin down kind of a situation. where the storms are going to quickly show some rotation, and then they may fizzle out within about 10 minutes. That's good news because it typically means if we do get tornadoes from this, they would be very weak if they reach the ground at all. But the Weather Service was not taking any chances given the dynamic nature of the atmosphere. Just want to make note that just off your screen here where we have these bright greens, those are some additional stronger winds, not necessarily severe winds, but they are strong enough that I'm starting to see them pick up on radar. That's where the bright greens are. It doesn't necessarily coincide with where the rain is the heaviest. It's some winds on the backside of this trying to move in. Going to keep our eye on that. Now, having said all that and assuring you in the city of Chicago that things are beginning to improve, I want to take you down to Groundy County because that is where we still have our rotational, our strongest rotation just to the west of Garfield. It's this storm. This is a conventional view of radar, and it would be the southern part of this storm, heading northeast at about 35. Back to the velocity view, you're going to likely see a very different scenario with this than what we saw with the cell in Chicago. I'll set this one into motion, and it shouldn't be too hard to pick out that what we call couplet, that area of reds and greens that are pretty close together. Now, I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing here because the rotation has really diminished quite a bit from this southern Groundy County storm. Garfield, you're not in the clear. But I want to let you know that I'm seeing things improve. Also, just out of frame here, see that one that moved on by, that rotation, that little red-green kind of couplet that moved on by? That was the tornado-warned cell that moved south of Joliet. That one also was just radar indicated. I don't have any indication that that actually touched the ground. Things are improving here west of Garfield. I want to stop the radar. The rotation that was in place has broadened and is weakened, and it's about right here. Probably going to see this tornado warning, if not allowed to expire, maybe even canceled a little bit earlier than expected, just because there's not much rotation left with this. It's also starting to exit the box here. This is probably going to stay west of Interstate 55, although at some point as the interstate becomes more north-south, it's certainly possible that the rotation could cross Interstate 55. Not necessarily the tornado, but the rotation. And we have to watch that cell too, because if it picks back up in rotation, it could begin to move into Will County or even farther downstream. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move a little farther downstream of the previous storm that was in Will County that we were concerned about moving into maybe the south side of Chicago. There's no warning in place right now. I have the warnings turned on. They are not in place, but there still may be some stronger cells, some stronger storms that have a little bit of rotation that we'll have to keep our eye on. There's the storm that we were watching earlier, and I'll move the map so you can see it. This is right near the junction of 57 and 80. No tornado out with this, no tornado warning, I should say, but there is still enough of a cell here, a little bit of a slight rotation to that cell, and enough rotation left in it that I'm going to keep my eye on it. There's that, what we would call a couplet I've been calling. It's very broad. See the brightest greens and the brightest reds? They're away from each other. If that tightens up, we may see an additional tornado warning issued for this cell. So this is one that I'm keeping my eye on. And to be honest, at the moment, even though this is the unwarned storm and the other two are still warned, this is the one that I actually think has the most concern at the moment. Let me go back and reset because you see some of the information here at the bottom of your screen, but I just want to make sure that we have the latest updated information. The Cook County tornado warning has been allowed to expire as of 12:15. That one is no longer. We still have the tornado warning for Groundy County. It's going to go until 12:30. But here's the thing, as I mentioned, the rotation from this has actually escaped the polygon, these little boxes that we have. So the Weather Service, while they're still watching the backside of that storm, they're either going to have to extend that tornado warning, which I don't think they're going to do just because the rotation was not as strong on radar. It's possible they have a spotter there that has seen this, or they're just going to have to cancel this warning altogether. It goes until 12:30, so there's still some time with this, and we're still watching the radar from it, which has a good strong cell here that's kind of out on its own. Here's the additional cell now just south of Midway that I'm watching. No tornado warning from this. And then there's the line of storms that is moving across Chicago, which embedded within it, I'm going to be watching for any minor little wiggles that may pop up. I think once we're done with this line, at least in the city, We may see the atmosphere stabilize for just a bit, but I think we're going to likely see things stay active all the way through the afternoon. Even as we get into the early evening, we may have enough energy in the atmosphere. Now, the good news is this will work it over a bit, so this is going to use up a lot of that energy, but it's still going to have dark skies over the city of Chicago. I don't know if they're able to pop up that imagery there from, we do have a live picture. Go ahead and pop it up if we have it. Kennedy and Armitage is what we're looking at here when we pull that live picture up, whenever they're able to get it. Again, we're looking at heavy rain that's going to be coming down, but the tornado warning that was in place, or that's still in place, is going to be Groundy County. And that one, we actually have a new warning that's in place now, not a tornado warning, but now a flash flood warning. And leave that live picture up if you could, Stephanie, because I want to show folks what has happened here and now how things are beginning to change. So here's the new information that's going to come out. I want to go to the warnings because we now have a flash flood warning. So this may change less from a tornadic situation to more of a flash flooding situation, which is often the case. The atmosphere rapidly explodes and we use up a lot of the energy initially, and that's why you get a lot of the severe warnings, and then it likely turns into a flooding threat. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. From Chicago, the Loop, to the western suburbs, all the way down to Joliet, we now have a flash flood warning that's going to be in place. That includes Cook, DuPage, and Will County. And that's going to go for a while. I look at the folks trying to clear the drains, exactly what you should be doing, although I advise you to please be careful if you're outside at the moment. There's not much lightning with this, but there is enough that it has us concerned. And we've already seen a lot of rain. When I pull up the rainfall totals, you're going to see that there's a lot of heavy rain that's come down just within the last 24 hours. Now, some of this is taking into account last night's rain and this morning's rain, but this little bright spot here, that's already saturated ground, and we may have received as much as 2 to almost 3 inches of rain in a very short amount of time. And keep in mind, the radar is not moving very much, so the storms that are out there are already going to be impacting you. They're going to continue to move over the same location. I said that these are moving northeast at about 35 miles per hour. First of all, that's not very quick. Second of all, they're going over the same locations, so the locations that are receiving the heavy rain are still continuing to receive the heavy rain, and these are also urban areas. You know, it's different if that much rain falls in locations that maybe have a lot of farmland or fields. The ground can absorb a lot of that, but when you're talking about urban or suburban areas, a lot of that water will run off. It will get into the drainage systems, and sometimes the drainage systems are just overwhelmed. So keeping the flash flood warning in mind, please be careful if you're out, because some of these areas may become overwhelmed with how much water is coming down. As we always say, and I know it's cliche, turn around, don't drown, don't drive through flooded roadways. There's a reason we tell you that. I believe just a couple of weeks ago in Bloomington, Indiana, a 30-year-old driver was swept off the road from heavy rains that moved through. So this is a very real threat. Also, keeping in mind that one little cell that we're tracking right there, if I were just looking at that on radar, I would say that probably has some rotation just from this view. But what I like to do is actually look at the rotation, get in closer, and see if I'm seeing anything. It's actually improved a little bit. I'm a little bit more optimistic about it than I was earlier. It was still exhibiting some minor rotation, but I'm not really seeing as much of the concern as I had earlier. Things are starting to improve, and I'm getting much more optimistic about how the day may wear on. Now, farther south, we still have the concern for some of the stronger storms that are just now moving into some of our viewing counties. As far as the warnings that are in place, I do not see the tornado warning any longer for Groundy County. What I do see, though, and this is indicative of how the day is going to go, is an additional tornado warning farther to the south. This is McLean County, outside of our viewing area. Right now, the only concern is this flash flood warning. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a quick little tour of the radar where the rain is coming down. I'm going to let you know that we have all warnings expired. Right now, I only see this flash flood warning that's in place, and then we're going to send you back to regular programming. However, as things go on, make sure you're checking back in, because if we get any new warnings, we are going to hop on the air and let you know exactly where things are. So here's the flash flood warning. This is going to go until 6:15. That's 6 hours from now. This is going to be a prolonged period of rain. It may be off and on, and that would help, but right now, at least within the next couple of hours, some really heavy rain is going to be moving in. Back to a check of the radar just before we leave you here. The heaviest of the rain is from really the north side of the city and the Loop, back to the southwestern suburbs, Plainfield, down to Joliet, and then this is going to continue. What I'm hoping is that this line starts to drift a little bit, because any little bit that we can move this is going to limit the amount of rain that falls. But we may get out of a tornadic situation and into a more flash flooding situation, and we're already starting to see the rain pile up, as you can see from our live picture here. So be careful out there today. We will provide updates on cbschicago.com as well as on air and online. Make sure you're staying safe. If there are any new tornado warnings, we will jump in as soon as possible.
Your college, it's a great opportunity to be a role model for young people and inspire them.